The Earth keeps its oldest stories in the places where light forgets to look. Deep valleys, wind-battered plateaus, tangled forests, and ice-locked tundra. For millennia, people who lived close to the land returned with the same haunted reports. Overturned fire pits, ruined herds, and tracks too large or too small to belong to anything living today. They marked those reports on cave walls and in folk songs, turning bone and shadow into monsters whispered about at night. People called those stories warnings, superstitions, exaggerations told around the hearth. But what if some of those tales weren't invented to frighten children? What if they were memories, not of ghosts, but of animals so strange and so large that the people who found their remains had no choice but to turn bone into myth? Today, we leave the ocean behind and walk into the world of land legends. 8 mythical creatures that almost certainly began as real animals. Some stalked forests long before our ancestors learned to farm. Some lived when ice wrapped the earth. All of them lived, and all of them left bones that became stories. This is where folklore meets fieldwork, where myth opens a drawer and reveals a fossil, and where the line between monster and mammal blurs into dust. Welcome to the forgotten beasts of our planet. Let's begin. 1. Gigantopithecus. First on our list is the creature behind every Bigfoot campfire tale and every shaky forest sighting. A hulking figure seen through fog, towering just beyond the tree line, watching with quiet intelligence. People described a mountain giant, a huge hairy bite that smelled of earth and moss, moved with surprising silence, and left footprints almost human, but far too big. But here's the twist. The legend likely grew from real bones. Gigantopithecus was a giant ape that lived in Asia during the Pleistocene. We know it from enormous teeth and jaw fragments found in China, Vietnam, and India, molars so large and thick that no living primate even comes close. Scientists estimate it stood over 2 meters tall and weighed as much as a small bear. It fed on bamboo, roots, and tough vegetation. A gentle giant, but a giant nonetheless. Now imagine a hunter discovering one of those teeth in a cave, or stumbling across a half-buried jawbone the size of a brick, with no science, no textbooks, no concept of extinct species. What would he conclude? The only explanation was story. A giant that once roamed the forest. Gigantopithecus wasn't imagination, it was memory. 2. Thylacoleo. Next up is a shadow from another continent, the panther spirit of old Australian folklore. Stories told of a compact, muscular predator that stalked shepherds at dusk, leaving behind torn carcasses and claw marks too deep for any normal cat. But here's the twist. The creature behind the myth wasn't a cat at all. Thylacoleo, the marsupial lion, was one of the strangest predators in Earth's history. It lived in Australia during the Pleistocene and carried a butcher's toolkit built into its jaw. Its premolars were shaped like knife blades, evolved perfectly for slicing flesh. Its forelimbs were thick and powerful, each paw armed with a retractable hooked claw, the only marsupial known to possess such a weapon. Imagine being a farmer thousands of years ago. Your livestock vanishes. You find enormous paw prints in soft soil, and a carcass torn apart with surgical precision. What do you call the thing that did it? A demon? A spirit? A panther from another world? Science calls it Thylacoleo, a real predator, a real hunter, and the truth behind a myth that once kept entire valleys awake. 3. Titanoboa. You've definitely heard stories of monstrous serpents lurking in swamps, giant snakes thick as tree trunks, capable of swallowing a canoe whole. According to legend, travelers saw ripples moving against the current, felt the ground vibrate as something huge passed beneath the water, and swore they glimpsed the curved back of a living river monster. But here's the twist. Something like that really existed. Titanoboa lived around 60 million years ago in what is now Colombia. Its fossils were found in a coal mine, vertebrae so large they looked like pieces of machinery. Titanoboa could reach over 40 feet in length. It weighed more than a ton, and it likely hunted like a supersized anaconda, striking with explosive force, wrapping enormous coils around its prey, and crushing crocodiles and giant turtles with ease. Imagine living near a riverbank and finding a vertebra the size of your hand. or a shed scale plate thicker than your finger. How you explain that without paleontology? You don't. You remember it as a monster serpent. Titanobo wasn't myth. It was the world reminding us how small we really are. 4. Andrewsarchus. Few creatures earn the title Nightmare Skull, but Andrewsarchus deserves it. Mountain legends once described a lone beast, a massive predator with a head bigger than a wolf's, a snout like a boar, and jaws capable of crushing bone. Nomads spoke of an animal that roamed between ridges, silent at a distance but thunderous up close. Then science found its skull. During an expedition in Mongolia in the 1920s, researchers uncovered a single enormous skull, long, deep, heavy, and armed with thick, powerful teeth. This skull belonged to Andrewsarchus, a meat-eating ungulate from the Eocene. We still don't know exactly what its body looked like. Its skeleton remains a mystery, but the skull alone is enough. Massive, terrifying, and unlike anything living today. Now imagine that skull weathering out of the earth thousands of years earlier. A shepherd finds it. A hunter stumbles across it. A tribe discovers it half buried in dust. What story do they tell? A beast of the mountains. A flesh-eating spirit. A predator too large to name. Sometimes myth begins with nothing more than a skull in the dirt and a frightened imagination. 5. Megaloceros. Now let's step into a forest where antlers scrape the sky. Across Europe and Asia, ancient tribes spoke of colossal stags, sacred creatures crowned with antlers as wide as tree branches and as heavy as shields. These stags were guardians of the forest, symbols of kingship, thunder, and winter. But the truth behind the myth is even better. Megaloceros, the so-called Irish elk, was one of the largest deer species ever to walk the earth. Its antlers could span up to 12 feet, wider than most doorways. Its height rivaled that of a horse, and its presence must have been awe-inspiring. Imagine finding one of those antlers lying in a field. Massive, curved like a crescent moon, too large to belong to anything familiar. What else could it have been except the crown of a forest god? Megaloceros was real, and it carried mythology on its head. 6. Homo floresiensis. Here's where the world gets much stranger. Across many island cultures, legends speak of little people, tiny tribes that move silently at night, borrow tools, live in caves, and vanish when approached. For centuries, outsiders dismissed these as fairy tales. Then we found one of them. In 2003, on the island of Flores in Indonesia, researchers discovered the remains of Homo floresiensis, a species of tiny humans only about a meter tall. They used stone tools. They hunted small animals, and they lived at the same time as modern humans, only tens of thousands of years ago. Now imagine an islander finding the skeleton of a tiny adult human in a cave, or discovering footprints the size of a child's, but far too narrow and deep to belong to one. Those stories of little forest people weren't fairy tales. They were memories passed from witness to witness until the real species faded into myth. Homo floresiensis proves something chilling. We shared this planet with other humans, and we told stories about them. 7. Arctidus. Now the world turns cold. Across North America, ancient myths describe a bear so enormous it walked like a man, a shadow that could stand upright in a doorway, blotting out the light behind it. Meet Arctidus, the short-faced bear. Standing 5 to 6 feet tall at the shoulder and towering far above a human when rearing, Arctidus was one of the largest bears to ever live. Its limbs were long and powerful. Its chest was broad. Its stride may have been fast enough to outrun a horse. To early humans migrating across the continent, Arctidus must have been a nightmare. Imagine finding a paw print as wide as your head, or a skull the size of a boulder, or hearing thunderous footsteps echo across a frozen valley at dusk. What story would you tell your children? A guardian of winter? A devourer of travelers? A spirit of the mountains? Arctidus was real, and big enough to become legend. 8. Elasmotherium, the Siberian unicorn. Our final creature brings us to the edge of magic. Across Eurasia, people told stories of unicorns, great beasts with a single horn, powerful enough to shatter shields and pure enough to bless those who approached with respect. Most dismissed the stories as fantasy. But here's the twist. The unicorn may have been real. Elasmotherium was a giant rhinoceros that lived on the steppes of Russia and Kazakhstan as recently as 39,000 years ago, recent enough for humans to see it. It carried a massive horn on its forehead, possibly over a meter long. Its body was huge and covered in thick hair. It stood taller than a modern rhino and weighed over 4 tons. Now imagine a hunter finding that horn, curved, spiraled, pointed like a lance, or seeing a huge, shaggy beast silhouetted on the horizon, its single horn catching the light. What else could he call it but a unicorn? Elasmotherium wasn't a fairy creature. It was an Ice Age titan whose bones still whisper through legend today. Myths don't bubble up from nowhere. They grow from the edges of knowledge. A tooth in a creek, a track in the mud, a skull pushed up by frost. The 8 animals we followed today lived in different times and places, yet each left a mark on human imagination that lasted long beyond their bones. Some were gentle giants. Some were ruthless hunters. All were real. All were stranger than the stories that sprang from their remains. And the most unsettling thought? We still find surprises in the ground, on islands, in peat bogs, in cliffsides where no one has looked for centuries. There are fossils we haven't discovered yet, and stories waiting in the dark, quietly asking to be remembered. So when someone tells you of giants in the forest, horned kings of ancient woods, or tiny people in hidden caves, remember, those tales might be older than language and sometimes older than us. Maybe the first storytellers weren't inventing monsters. Maybe they were remembering. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, there's more waiting. But for now, keep your eyes on the ground and your respect for what lies beneath it.